I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Welcome to the Fidelis Leadership Podcast, a place of learning for those who aspire to leadership excellence. Here's our host, Mike Etor.
Stephen Drum is a retired Navy SEAL Master Chief and the co-creator of the Navy's Warrior Toughness program. With 27 years of experience in training and developing highly skilled teams to perform at their best in life-threatening situations, Stephen knows a thing or two about thriving under pressure. Today, he's an inspirational speaker, coach, and the author of a recently published book titled Life on the X, the Navy SEAL Guide to Meeting Any Challenge with Courage, Confidence, and Readiness. It's got a lot of information, a lot of leadership. Steve, I track you on social media. You do good stuff. Just thankful you're here. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate the invitation.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we got to ask, how's the book launch going? It looks exciting.
It's going well, and I'm very grateful, obviously, in general, but, specifically grateful for those in my circle that have been instrumental in supporting me at every turn in the process. So, I'm very happy about that.
Well, we're going to talk more about it later. For now, though, the intro, obviously very brief, high level. Tell us a little bit more. What do we need to know more about Stephen Drum?
Yeah. So again, we were just talking about this before we went on. We both kind of grew up on the East Coast. I'm from a town called Media, Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia. And I was a very mediocre athlete, but decided that I was really committed to being, a commando of some sort, initially maybe in the Army, but then, had an uncle that was a retired naval aviator and an airline pilot, and he kind of nudged me in the direction of the Navy. And so I decided that I wanted to commit to train to be a SEAL. And I joined the Navy boot camp at 18 years old, right out of high school, and was really bad at math, so missed qualifying for the SEAL program by a couple of points. And so had which actually I think benefited me because I had another 2 years to further season and mature, and actually hooked up with a mentor, a former SEAL that kind of trained a bunch of us up. And so I think at the end of the day, it was a blessing. So went in, made it through SEAL training, 95, graduated 96, and kind of spent a 27-year career that I'm really grateful and proud of.
Yeah, awesome. And so after you got through BUD/S and became a SEAL, you spent the rest of your career in SEAL-related duties?
That's right. SEAL-related duties to include when I left. I spent, aside from a couple of postings here and there, really spent my entire career in the Virginia Beach area, East Coast SEAL teams. And then I had never moved. And so the writing was on the wall. I'm about to make my final pay grade, which, an E9 Master Chief of the Navy. And they say, hey, you haven't moved, you're going to have to move. And so I wanted to lean out in front of that. And I'm like, all right, well, where can I kind of go somewhere that's going to afford me some stability for my family? Right. And so I'm like, I ended up at the Navy's boot camp and a SEAL related job, but definitely kind of detached from the SEAL teams up in Great Lakes, Chicago area.
Yeah, that's where the Warrior Toughness program and all that was.
Yeah, and so I initially came up to run this program called Dive Motivator, which I think they since dissolved. But it was our job to kind of, it was my staff and I's job to get recruits that came in who had specific contracts to try out for programs like SEAL, Diver, Air Rescue Swimmer, the difficult selection processes. It was our job to get them ready for their next phase in the pipeline while they were at boot camp. And while I was there, I got approached and said, hey, we need you, a psychologist and a Navy chaplain, to develop a program on toughness based on the kind of mind, body, soul approach. So that was the final thing that I did in the Navy before I retired in 2019.
Yeah, I love it. So before we start into the meat of the interview, I always try and orient the audience, all of whom are leaders or aspiring leaders. They want to, aspire to excellence. So what do you do now? Who are your clients? How do you help them?
Yeah, so thanks for asking. What I love to do is get in front of and engage audiences, whether it's, 1,000 people or 20 people. And so I do speaking, I do training for organizations, and primarily the people that hire me are those that are, and a lot of us actually quite frankly fall into this category, but are a lot of us who have that critical point of execution, right? Whether it's a new manager leading a team for the first time, whether it's pitching to the C-suite, whether it's in front of that important client or customer, and you have to align all your efforts and resources to being able to show up with your A game that day. So people that feel that type of pressure, those are the people that I primarily speak with. And so that's a lot of different leadership. That's finance, that's sales, a lot of stuff in the medical sales industry. But yeah, although I've done a bunch of different things, it's mostly seems to gravitate towards those organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, another question I ask up front as an orientation point, Stephen, if we were in an elevator, we only had a minute together, I found out who you were and what you do. Now that I know what you do, I want to ask you, what's your philosophy on leadership? What do you got in 1 to 3 sentences? What would you tell me?
Yeah, if I can have maybe 3 sentences, I would say, primarily it's to create an architecture for readiness. If you look at the third part of my subtitle, it's courage, confidence, and readiness. And as you know, as somebody in the military, everything that we do is for us to attain a level of readiness. In fact, and I'm sure it's the same thing in the Marine Corps, but the SEAL teams, you move throughout a training cycle, and at each hurdle that you clear in terms of your training, you're assessed a higher level of readiness. And so you have an ultimate level of readiness that you have to attain before you and your unit actually deploys overseas. But other than that, as a leader, fundamentally, I think you need to be very clear in setting your objectives, and you need to model the behavior that you expect others to exhibit. Starts with the leader.
Yeah, I agree with that. So let me ask you the classic question: leaders, born or made?
Made.
Yeah. So let me probe one level deeper on that. I say that there are some people, I do agree. I think leaders are made. That said, I do think there are some people that are born with a level of aptitude, sports, math, music, science, whatever, languages, and they just seem to have that chip already on the motherboard. And so they have an aptitude. They're born talent. That said, and I'm sure you saw this in the military, a whole lot of those folks with the aptitude, if they don't work hard, then the average Joe who's working hard can greatly eclipse their leadership ability, leadership effectiveness. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, I have to say that's exactly right. And I think exactly as you described, there are people that are born with certain levels, certain attributes. I think maybe primarily at the top of the list would be charisma, that people are naturally going to instinctively want to be drawn in and follow that person. They are very likable. They are charming. And so that sets the table, right, for their success if they pursue the actual craft of being an effective leader. On the flip side, the double-edged part of that sword is that those can create blind spots. It can create complacency in somebody that people naturally want to follow, but there's no real work or investigation done into leadership or into making good decisions. Then that can often be a detriment in that sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. I love it. Well, listen, I think that we're going to agree on this, I'm sure. Leadership is a learned skill. And I know the SEAL teams are all about world-class, and so am I. I love that term. And I maintain that someone that is willing to put in the reps, get out there in that leadership laboratory, make mistakes and learn from them, I think they can become a world-class leader. Not necessarily in a world-class organization. I'm saying you could be a world-class leader leading the mailroom, the loading dock, the finance department, whatever the case may be. I don't think it's limited by the organization you're in. I don't think it's limited by your gender or age, physical strength, or whatever. So I'd like to hear your term: world-class leadership, effectiveness. Can you?
Yeah, I think, first of what you said is, I think it's important to consider, you can't always judge the leader. You have to judge the leader on the effect that they have on the results, right? You can't be too quick to judge them based on the medium in which they deliver that, right? Because some guys are going to be those very effective but very introverted type leaders who they may be unassuming in their style, yet they are really good at certain things that really drive results. And, I think just in my experience, to answer your question in terms of the great leaders that I've seen, the traits that stand out to me as in common are, I think primarily, I would say humility, because within humility is what I would see as these leaders who are the charismatic leader, but they will go down and then say, all right, everybody stop what you're doing. Hey, I don't have the answer here. let me open it up to the most junior person on the team to say, hey, what do you think about this? Right. Do you have maybe a creative solution for this? They have the willingness to do that, to be able to do that. And that after that, they are very deliberate. And that's the whole kind of premise of my book, is being very deliberate with how you show up to the moments that matter. Deliberate in how you prepare for the curveballs, deliberate in how you are mindful of the energy that you bring into a room. Now, I was to be forthcoming, emotions sometimes negatively impacted my ability to lead, both within my family and also even at work. The best leaders and the things that I tried to work on is really getting those emotions in check. And it's not to say that we're going to squash down emotions. It's to say that we understand the role that emotions play. Emotions are signals that give us information, and we have to be able to use that to our benefit. If we feel that we are becoming frustrated, well, why are we becoming frustrated? Does the team actually need a stern talking to?
Yeah.
Or are they having a hard time and I need to stop and say, all right, I feel frustration. Me responding with frustration will not be the right tool for this situation. And I think really being able to detach, to read those emotions and deliver what best serves that moment, independent of what the emotions are telling us.
Yeah, I love that, Stephen. And for the listeners out there, I'm listening to him talk. In the last 2 minutes, Stephen just dumped a whole lot of gold nuggets on us. And so let's keep going. Let's talk about the book, Life on the X, a Navy SEAL's Guide to Meeting Any Challenge with Courage, Confidence, and Resilience. I pre-ordered it, Stephen. It hasn't arrived yet. I need to go back on Amazon. I should have had it by now. I wanted to get it by the time we talked.
I don't get on a rabbit hole, but it's funny you said that, because some people got the book even before it was actually released. And then you're the second person I talked to today that was like, hey, I ordered my book a while back. Where is it? So
I wanted to be able to hold it up and wave it, to the audience, but no go today. But anyway, why did you write the book? You covered it a little bit already. Why did you write the book? What audience is it intended for?
Yeah. And I think one of the primary drivers of that, quite honestly, was that Warrior Toughness program, because it really forced me to be very introspective and reflective of the lessons that I've learned, my experiences over my career. And I think that I say this, and I say this a lot, but I'll say it again, is, I really enjoyed my time for combat, or my time in combat. I enjoyed training for combat, but you have to really look at what the overall impact was. And the impact that I made primarily was not taking X amount of bad guys off the battlefield. The impact really was probably me training other people. And again, whether that's other SEALs, whether that's foreign partner special operations forces, or whether that's regular sailors in the Warrior Toughness program, that was my biggest impact point. And I would say, especially with the Warrior Toughness program. And I realized that, like, the things that I'm teaching, those are not specific to military people, right? Military people, obviously, they face higher level of consequences and intensity that your average person in the business world is going to face. That said, though, in our brains, it's really not that different, right? When you're feeling unprepared and the stakes are high and you walk into that door in a business situation, man, I'll tell you what, you may as well be facing bullets, because I've been under the stress. I've felt the stress in a non-combat situation, and I couldn't necessarily discern the difference. In fact, I probably felt more stressed in that moment than I did when actually bullets are flying at me, because I felt like I really knew what to do in that situation. So having said all of that, that's what inspired me to do the book. And so I love going in there, distilling down the lessons, not just from military experience, from my stories, but also in the book, I've included, some of the highest level performers, whether they be business leaders, CEOs, professional athletes, Olympians, other military folks. It felt like it was really important to say, hey, these are the common traits, methodology, and skills that all of great performers, regardless of their industry or profession, can leverage to bring their A game consistently.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. You're obviously speaking more of this inner game, resilience and things like that, courage, confidence. And obviously my main angle is leadership. And, we're talking both things, common human nature. And it's all about human nature. And I love what you're saying. To any doubters out there, I support what Stephen is saying. The toughness, the things that he learned in the SEAL teams, taught SEALs, special operations forces, and just regular sailors. teaching human beings, and it applies entirely. You may have to adapt it a little bit, but it applies with a lot less adaptation than you may think to the civilian and business world. So enough for me, Stephen. What are some of the main lessons in the book? You've already mentioned a couple of them, but if you were limited to, you can talk as long as you want, but, ideally people want to go out and buy your book. So give us some teasers,
and I'll start with addressing something you said in terms of hey, we talk about leadership. I was on a leadership podcast, a couple months ago, and, the host was like, well, this is great. This is very much geared towards the individual. And, where I would want to push back on that is it's like when you're a leader in a position and it's smooth sailing, right? It's calm, right? Everything's good. You're not tested. Yeah. A true leader is not tested until those storms roll in, right? Yeah. Until we face those significant curveballs or those crises. That's when you see the strength of that leadership in that individual revealed. And so I say this, if you're able to master the things that I'm telling you at the individual level that are for you, the individual leader, you can seamlessly translate that into how you're going to manage and lead other people and other teams. And so specifically, I break the book into 4 parts, and it's based on the framework that I developed for the Warrior Toughness program. And it's kind of very much akin to how we would look at planning, preparing, and executing in a mission in a SEAL troop. And so first is the commit piece. And, in a leadership perspective, that can very much be kind of your commander's intent. That can be your objective. That can be your purpose. But it's also at the individual level, it's a lot about character. It's about really understanding what the values are that drive you to be your best self, discovering values and taking those values and distilling them down into principles, because values without principled actions are pretty much meaningless. And so that's really the first part of the book, is that discovery in terms of values, beliefs, and principles. The next part, we move into preparing, how you actually prepare, right? Just like you would go out on a combat operation. Now, everybody's level of specific technical preparation is going to be different, but one of the main ideas I have here is the concept of being brilliant on the basics, being brilliant at the basics. We go out on a combat operation in Iraq, we'd roll out sometimes on a ground assault force with maybe as many as 15 trucks. Now, you wouldn't think it, but it takes a heck of a lot of practice and preparation to get good radio checks when you have all the kind of different types of interference to radio signals, getting good head counts, just those basic things of getting people to and from a target objective takes a heck of a lot. And that's not sexy, but it's absolutely necessary. In fact, many of the combat operations, they succeed, they fail based on the execution of those very basic things. Yeah. And additionally, we get into things such as mental skills, that now we're looking at what some of the greatest performers in the face of pressure and distraction are professional athletes, the things that they have to use. It's mental rehearsal. It's emotional regulation. It's focused by being mindful. It's being able to lower that energy, to regulate that energy, or arousal control, as we say in the performance psychology world. The mental skills required to make sure that not, hey, we practice some things, hey, but now we got to execute it, in the clutch, and we need to be composed, which is a huge part of what it takes to be successful on that X. And then lastly, or I would say thirdly, it's the execution piece, right? It's like I've trained, I've prepared, I've got my resources in order, but now I'm actually going to walk out onto the X, as we say, which is that pivotal moment, where that kill zone, as we say in the military. Yeah. And how can I be agile? How can I be situationally and self-aware? And how can I pivot and adjust when required? And finally, just as the hallmark of any great military organization, we're only as good as our ability to draw the right conclusions from our experience and put it into deliberate steps to perform better the next time. And so it's about the AARs, the after action reviews. Without learning what we're doing and assessing what we've done, we're only going to meet with limited success. So in a nutshell, that was a long-winded description of the book, but yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, is your book, like I said, I wish I had read it already, but I don't have it. I will. Is your book structured? It sounds like it's structured as such that, a serious student would read it, yellow sticky it, yellow highlight it, keep reading it over again, and can basically formulate his own program from it. I know you have programs yourself structured around it, but can someone do this on their own via the book?
And thank you so much for asking that, because it was meant to be prescriptive. Now, there are some people going to read a book written by a Navy SEAL, they're going to expect some personal stories, and there are some of those in there. But as I said before, there's a lot of stories from other high performers. Yeah. But every story that I tell, every example that I use, I want it to be that red thread in which there is a prescription for that. So at the end of each chapter or section, there are steps that I want you to either do some investigation, I want you to do some experimentation, I want you to take notes, and I want you to put it into play. And if you go to my website, which we can get to later, stephendrum.com, there actually is formats, free resources for you to download. There's a cheat sheet. Mm-hmm. This is kind of like we use in the military to go through, hey, we got a call for fire. Here's the steps we need. So I use that. I include that for you to walk through for your next big event, as well as an after action review format that you can use to make sure that you and your organization are learning. But it's intended to be prescriptive.
Yeah. Well, listen, let's talk about this. You've obviously observed, trained, worked with, mentored, coached so many leaders, both in the military and in the private sector, Stephen. Let's talk about the top slice of the top leaders. These are the top 10%. Let's take the top 10% of the top 10%, your water walker, so to speak. Are there any characteristics, traits, habits, tactics that most of the very best seem to have in common?
Well, and I think I honestly, I don't think that I can layer too much on what I spoke to previously, other than to say that, the most, and this is the military bias, right? If you want to be seen as a credible leader in the SEAL teams and special operations, then you have to be the subject matter expert, right? You don't have to necessarily when I was a senior enlisted leader, it had been years since I'd been through sniper school. So I didn't know all the latest software for the different type of computer programs for the cameras and all that type of stuff. And so I would have to have the junior guys train me up on that. But when it came to battlefield tactics and things like that, you as the leader have to demonstrate. Yeah. You have to, again, model proficiency in what you're talking about. It doesn't mean if you're a CEO of a large organization that you are an expert in everything. That's not why you're paid to be there. Mm-hmm. What I would say to that is you owe it to your organization, you owe it to your shareholders to get out of your office and get in the fabric of every level of leadership and operation throughout your organization. Because only when you do that, in fact, you asked me the best leaders. Well, some of the most ineffective leaders are those that rely too strictly, too heavily on those just one or two rungs down the leadership echelon. You cannot rely on the ground truth for that. You have to go to the very bottom. You have to get in the field. You have to go to shipping, receiving, marketing, sales. You have to talk with those people to get a sense of what their life looks like and how your decisions as an organization shape what's happening on the ground.
Yeah, I love that. I especially love the leadership by walking around, which I'm big on. Marines the same way. And we have a saying that let me make sure I don't screw this up. The best fertilizer for organizational excellence is the footprints of the leader. And so that saying just really summed up what you said. Get off your butt, get out of your office, and get out amongst your people. The people don't expect you to be an expert. They expect you to show up. And as a leader, you'd be surprised what you learn, see, observe when you're not sitting in your office.
Well, and I get it. There's probably some CEOs right there be like, oh, like you have any idea what it's like to deal with some of the crises, the constant fires on a day-to-day basis. And I understand that, but, one of the things, and McChrystal writes about this in his book, Team of Teams, and it's my experience too, is the effective leaders, like I say, in Afghanistan, where you would have these remote outposts, right, or outstations. And so General McChrystal would get with his limited staff and they would fly. They would do what's called a battlefield circulation, where they would fly to all these different outposts. And so, if you're a CEO of an enormous organization, you can't meet with everybody. You may not even be able to effectively meet with every different plant or work center that you oversee, but you want to be known as the guy or gal that has the reputation for listening. So even if I never talk to you, the CEO, personally, the people that I engage with were like, yeah, she came in there and she really listened to us. I could tell that I was being heard,
Yeah.
And so that's going to cause me to be further invested, more double down. And once I establish that reputation as the leader, maybe not the first couple times I engage with people because they're still kind of very trepidatious, but eventually they're going to let their guard down and they're going to start giving me the real truth. And that's ultimately what we need to do in able to best inform our decision making.
Yeah, I love that. And I will tell you a little bit of my shared experience or my individual experience. As you know, I was a C-level executive in a $1 billion plus publicly traded company. And now I've coached for the last dozen years or so. And so I've got a lot of experience talking to high level heavy hitters. And I will tell you, Stephen, the very best CEOs, C-level people, really real deal executives, they do get around. They schedule that time to spread their presence around. My experience is the guy or gal that's too busy. Oh, I'm just too busy I'm meeting 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. They're usually not your most effective executives. And so any executive that says he's too busy, any leader that says they're too busy to get out amongst their people is a leader that either has poor time management or his priorities are in the wrong place. Because as you know, a leader is developing a culture within his or her unit, whether or not he's taking an active part in it or not. That culture is developing, right? Any comments on that?
No, I that completely squares with my experience. And I like what you said. Hey, the culture, you're either shaping it or it's happening as a result of your kind of, I don't know, absence. But that's a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, on the dark side of that coin, I always say we can learn from, and I know I've learned a lot from bad leaders too, by bad example saying, well, I'll never do that. I'll never say this. I won't give the ass chewing when out of frustration, when I should really talk to him because, frustration being, giving an ass chewing is not going to be. So anyway, the bottom line is, are there any common traits, habits, things that some of the ineffective, not necessarily terrible, but less effective leaders exhibit that you can point our listeners to where, hey, be alert because you can fall into these traps too?
Yeah, and I would, again, I hate to be keep repeating myself, but lack of original ideas, right? No, but I would definitely say the emotional component is being led by emotions, and sometimes what I see most is being led by fear, right? Mm-hmm. The fear of being kind of getting in the way of proper and thorough and mindful risk management. You're weighting too heavily sometimes on risk, right? Maybe, or you're taking too much risk conversely. And a lot of things that I see are just the inability to set clear objectives and demonstrate, maintain, communicate clear standards. And I think that's the one thing that I love, that I often, that I really loved about the military is the good leaders painted a picture of exactly what that desired end state is, right? What that commander's intent is, right? Yeah. We're about to go do this thing. Here's exactly what success looks like. Now, how you get there, here's your left and right limits. Right. Creatively come up with a solution based on the resources and the limitations, constraints. But I'm not going to tell you how to do this. I'm just going to tell you what the results are that we need, right? And then standards. You always know where you stand, right? And so people always have to know where they stand. And I think as the leader, we talked about, leadership is you have to constantly refine, because, you may have tried and true methods and principles for leadership that have served you, but that always has to be placed upon the backdrop of an evolving generation in the workforce. And one of the things is, we could look at that is in terms of, the expression I heard is, hey, the millennials, they want frequent feedback. The Gen Zs, they want constant feedback, right? And so it's a matter of being able to do that. And you have to always let people know where they stand. You have to be able to get whatever corrections, interventions, you have to inject those at the outset before we start going down a path where we've wasted a lot of time and resources. Yeah. So I think it's like, hey, here's where we're going. Here's how we get there. Here's your left and right limits. Here's what needs to happen at the end. And here are the standards in which you need to perform them.
Yeah.
And it's clear to everyone.
Yeah, I love that. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, Stephen, but a lot of what you just said really describes excellent and world-class organizations that maintain their cultures, yet have proved adaptable with the differences among generations. Because as you know, there's 3 or 4 generations out in the workplace right now, and you cannot approach them all identically. That said, there is one mission, one culture in the company. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think one of the quotes that I heard, and not really a quote, but more of an anecdote, was, hey, the sooner we can get our people to say, as the example is, right, sometimes decisions are made and you look at it in a lens of us versus them, us at lower level management or the workforce, and them up there at the leadership role, as opposed to making the transition to, hey, this is what we have to do, not they, we. The sooner, the greatest organizations, and just like that in the SEAL team, just like, no, we don't do that here. That's not the standard that we have. It's not they want this or they're going to punish us. It's that, hey, we do this, we don't do that as an organization. The sooner you can get there, the more effective your organization is going to be, I believe.
Yeah, I agree with that. I want to segue into a related but different topic. I know this is near and dear to your heart. I know as a young frogman, you were surrounded by excellence, role models, mentors, and coaches, and all of that. Maybe sometimes when you didn't really appreciate it or want it, but you were surrounded by it, I always try and impress on the younger leaders, 20s and 30s, maybe even early 40s. You've got, most people get role models. They have a hero or whatever, and a lot of them get mentors. Not many of them seek out coaches and all that. So I want to ask your thoughts to the younger folks, the importance of really making sure they have role models, mentors, and coaches from the earliest point possible on their leadership journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I think the benefit of having a military experience, right? I always look at, I talk about my first leadership role in the military, and that was at Navy boot camp. And you know what I was in charge of? The laundry for my division, right? And not a whole lot of, it's like the ship's not coming to a halt if I screw up my job. But hey, it's my first introduction to getting a collective bunch of people to meet a standard, to do some very simple things. And that the point of that is that in the military, especially in special operations, is that focus is on leadership is always, job number one. In fact, you're always taught, whatever job you're in, I'm a team leader, I'm a platoon chief, I'm a troop chief. It's always my job to train my replacement. So it's like, the job is here, but even when we go out and we do conduct a combat operation, in the back of my head, I'm always thinking about it getting exposure to the people that are going to have to do this after me. And so I think, having said all that, if you are not afforded that opportunity because of the organization that you work in as a new employee, then you've got to seek that externally, right? And you've got to find coaching, you've got to find mentoring, and not necessarily like you want to find technical mentoring, meaning the things that are going to help you best serve your job. But you also want to have people that can mentor you on what it's like to develop as a leader in general, right? Or as an engineer or a sales manager in general, right? I think less specificity. And I think that's critically important. And I kind of lost my train of thought on the next thing I was going to say, but good time for you to eject.
No. Well, you're on the right track, and it leads me to another question. As you know, again, in the military, we were surrounded by training programs. You could look as a young frogman and say, if I stay in for 20 or 30 years, I'm going to go to these schools, this kind of leadership training, whatever the case may be. And I know that the community is very small, the Marine Corps is bigger, but I knew I was going to be sent to school every 3 or 4 years, and sometimes for a full year and all of that, learning tactics and things like that. Come out here, it was a shock to me because almost no companies have formal leadership training and development. I'll talk to CEOs, executives, and say, and I bait them and like, well, what's your budget for capital expenditures? Oh, we've got 32 million. We're buying new factories. We're building a new building, blah, blah, blah. And I ask them 5 of these questions. They have it. And I say, so what's your budget? What's your line item for leadership development? And it's usually 0. And so where I'm being long-winded here, Stephen, is the majority of people have no leadership training whatsoever given to them by their company. And so the onus on them, even if they do get it provided, they have to self-develop. A lot of your leadership skills was not entirely provided by the SEAL community. You took it upon yourself. And so every leader, even out here in the business world or any civilian organization, you have a duty to develop yourself. I want to see what you think about that and some ways that a person, the company ideally hires Stephen Drum to come in and talk. If they don't, how can that person still get some of what you're teaching on their own? Self-development.
Yeah, and I do coaching. I will say it's on a more limited basis. It's got to be the right fit. But, if people want coaching, they could definitely reach out to me for that. I do training. How I distribute my content shows up in a bunch of different ways. But I think, honestly, if you check out the book, follow me, you're gonna get the best of what I have. That's up to you to judge, but I believe that it's effective. I know it's helped me. It's helped the people that I've trained who've gone on to do great things. So I think that kind of speaks for itself. And the fact that the program that we help create is continuing to grow in the Navy. But I think definitely try to get some professional development. But I also let's take the opportunity, because we are talking to leaders, is to push this back on the organizations and the leader themselves. And I think there's this kind of paradox of not wanting to give too much lavish too much training and development on people that are likely going to work, because we live in such a transient style of work relationships, work employer relationships. But what I would say to that is that the paradox here is train people to be more marketable to another organization, because when you're doing that, you are investing in them and they are going to have value in staying. You're going to demonstrate that you value retaining them by making them, ironically, more marketable to a different organization. At the end of the day, are a lot of them going to leave? Yeah. But eventually you'd like to, again, establish a reputation for being a place that develops leaders. You look at the people like, Johnson & Johnson, Enterprise Rental Car, people go out of college to those organizations because they are known for that. So be instrumental in developing a reputation for your organization, that you're known for leadership development.
Yeah, I love that. I tell young folks right in college, I said, you might want to go to Enterprise. They have a great reputation for leadership development, putting people in leadership positions. And so, yes, everything you said is absolutely true. Well, listen, our time is up. I wanted to see, I can't let you out of here, Stephen, without asking you the fantasy question. If you were able to bring back one leader from the past, spend a full day with that person, who would it be and why?
Yeah, that's a tough one. There's so many people that go through your head, and there's people, I think, because it's such a fantasy question, I would have to take the opportunity to probably go back a lot further, and I've always kind of been a Civil War buff, as a kid. And I think, one of the person that comes to mind is Joshua Chamberlain. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but he was, if you've ever seen the movie Gettysburg or read the great book, Killer Angels by Michael Shara. Yeah. He basically was the, a lieutenant or a colonel with the 20th Maine. And he was critical in one of the key battles on Little Round Top in the Battle of Gettysburg, and turned, he was grievously wounded, was basically promoted to general, thinking it was his deathbed. He survived, was wounded a couple more times. And after that, he became, I think he served, he was the 32nd governor of Maine, served 4 terms, 1-year terms. But yeah. So I think he did just be really cool to have, conversations about way people looked at life back then. And
I that's a great choice. I went to an Army school for captains, infantry captains. They send a few Marines a year, and I wanted to go. And part of that, it's at Fort Benning, Georgia. Part of that, they took us to Little Round Top. And so what you're talking about, I actually walked that terrain on the hilltop, and there were U.S. Park Service guides there that knew the battle in and out. And they showed us trench lines. They showed us where the bayonet charge was. They were out of ammo. It's okay, we've got no choice. Let's attack, and he just ran. And so it's a great choice, great leader, a great representation of what the influence of one person, one leader's influence can turn the tide of a firefight, which it was, and then it turned the tide of a whole battle. So yeah, excellent choice. Well, listen, I know that people are going to want to reach out to you. I know for sure they're going to want to find a book. Where can we find your book, and where can we find Stephen Drum?
Yeah, so thanks. The book right now, it's as of the recording towards the latter part of March, is available. The paperback and the audio or the ebook available anywhere online books are sold, and then the audio book will actually be released on April 25th or April 18th. Sorry. And so you can come, and if you want, you can connect with me. Check out my website, stephendrum.com, STEPHENDRUM.com. And there's a couple of resources there that you can probably use to your benefit. So
you're on LinkedIn as well, right?
Yeah. So LinkedIn and Instagram primarily.
Yeah. Got it. Well, listen, it's been a great podcast episode. This is going to be a popular one. I thank you so much, Stephen, for doing it. I wish you best of luck with the book, best of luck with your business and all of that. And selfishly, I'd ask you to consider to come back and let's do another one.
Absolutely. I'd appreciate that.
All right. Have a great day.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe, rate, review, and recommend to your friends. Please visit our website at fidelisleadership.com and sign up for our leadership newsletter. Until next time, remember the words of the ancient Greek philosopher Pericles.
What you leave behind is not what is engraved in stone monuments, but is woven in the lives of others.